A blood-stained lady's coat, a patch of fallen, wild grass by the river. A young nurse went missing under mysterious circumstances on her way home. Strange figures frequently appeared during video investigations. Who committed crimes one after another under the cover of night? Who extended a sinister hand to her on the path? Hello everyone, I'm glad you've come to my channel. This is a channel dedicated to real-life crime cases in China. I hope you'll like it. Don't forget to like and subscribe so that you won't miss my other exciting videos. On the evening of November 2015, the city of Huangming in Yan'an, China, had shed the hustle and bustle of the day. The residents of the small town had gradually retired for the night. However, Mr. Tian, who lived on Dongguan Power Road, was feeling rather restless at this moment. He was anxiously waiting for his daughter, Miss Tian, who was on her way home from work.
I called my daughter, but her phone was off. Then I asked my wife, who said our daughter had just called her to say she'd be home for dinner tonight.
Miss Tian was a nurse at a local hospital. She was on the night shift and got off work at 8 p.m. Normally, it only takes a little over 10 minutes to drive from the hospital to home. But it was already 9:30 p.m. at this time, yet Miss Tian still hadn't come back.
Then I called her boyfriend and asked if he knew why my daughter hadn't come home after work. But he told me that Miss Tian had called him on her way home from work and said she was almost home at the time.
After receiving a call from Miss Tian's father, her boyfriend couldn't help but feel worried. So, he quickly went to Miss Tian's home to find out what was going on. Miss Tian was on the phone with him, on her way home, and hung up only when almost at the door. More than an hour had passed. Why hadn't Miss Tian arrived home yet? At Miss Tian's doorstep, he found some items scattered on the ground.
My daughter's boyfriend ran over and told me there were Miss Tian's belongings on the ground in front of our house. I hurried to check, and sure enough, they were my daughter's things. I immediately had a bad feeling.
This discovery sent Miss Tian's family into a panic, so Mr. Tian immediately called the police, hoping to get their help.
When we received the report, we asked the reporter some questions about the missing person. We wanted to know if the missing person had any mental problems, but the answer was no, she was perfectly normal.
A young nurse went missing for no apparent reason on her way home, and her personal items were scattered in front of her house. The police thought that Miss Tian was likely in some kind of danger. As a result, the police assisted Miss Tian's family overnight to search for her whereabouts along the way.
That night, we searched along her route home, especially checking abandoned houses and places where someone might hide, but found no suspicious clues.
On the morning of November 21st, the police dispatched a large number of officers to intensify the search efforts.
During our search, we found a small river near Miss Tian's home, and there were what looked like human-made dragging marks on the ground by the river.
In front of Miss Tian's house was a small path. On the south side of the path was a small river. The police searched along the river in both the east and west directions from the location where suspicious traces were found. About 200 yards east of Miss Tian's house on the river bank, in an open area, the police found a pink coat. Miss Tian's mother recognized it at a glance. This was her daughter's clothes.
It looked exactly like my daughter's clothes, but my husband said it couldn't be. I clearly remembered she wore that outfit to work yesterday.
Miss Tian's mother clearly remembered that her daughter had asked her how the newly bought clothes looked before going out. She didn't go to work happily until her mother said they looked good. Then, to everyone's surprise, just one night later, this new dress was left abandoned here all alone, and Miss Tian was nowhere to be found. When inspecting this piece of clothing, the police found what seemed to be bloodstains. This escalated the case rapidly. So they immediately organized the police force to conduct an on-site investigation. At the same time, they inspected Miss Tess' coat.
We found palm-sized bloodstains on the inside of the clothing, but because it had rained that night, the bloodstains had faded significantly, so we couldn't confirm they were human blood at the time, just suspected human blood.
The police tested the suspected bloodstains on the clothes. The test results showed the blood on the clothes indeed belonged to a human being, and it was all from Miss Tess. Judging from the trace analysis, Miss Tess' blood loss was not very large. The police judged that she should have suffered an external injury, but it wouldn't be fatal. The police also extracted the DNA of a male from this piece of clothing.
We searched outward from the spot where the clothing was found. About 5 meters north of the center, we noticed a pile of dead leaves with obvious stomp marks. We suspected something had happened there.
In addition, about 20 yards south of the scene, where the coat was found, by the small river, the police found a patch of wild grass in a fallen state. The direction in which the wild grass fell pointed towards the river surface.
The flattened weeds found along the riverbank were exactly the size of an adult. We figured this was likely the crime scene, and the victim was probably thrown into the river by the perpetrator.
Since it had rained the night before, the water flow in the small river was very fast. If Miss Tess had been pushed into the river, she was likely to be washed downstream. But the police searched a long way along the river course and didn't find Miss Tess' figure. By this time, it had been more than 12 hours since Miss Tess went missing. Thus, Miss Tess' family began to post missing person notices on social media. Miss Tess came from a large family where 3 generations lived together. Her parents ran a building materials business with a modest income. Miss Tess' parents not only had to take care of the elderly but also 3 children. Miss Tess was born in 1991 and was the eldest among the 3 children. In the eyes of her parents, she was a well-behaved, unsensible child. In order to help out with the family finances, after graduating from a nursing school, Miss Tess started working at the hospital.
My daughter is so sensible. She's kind to everyone. She didn't deserve this. I'm really worried about whether she's alive or dead.
In order to find the missing Miss Tess as soon as possible, the police assembled their best officers to form a special investigation team to fully solve this case. After an extensive search, they finally found suspicious items about 2 miles east of Miss Tess' home, on the north side of Highway 210. These clothes were stained with fresh dirt. The police judged that these clothes were likely to have been discarded recently. By inspecting these clothes, the police found that they were indeed related to Miss Tess' disappearance.
Using a special light source to examine it closely, we found another bloodstain on the cuff of the clothing. We tested the bloodstains from this piece of clothing on the previous women's clothing and discovered they all came from the same person.
So, who was the owner of these clothes? Why were there Miss Tess' bloodstains on them? And who threw them by the roadside? Where was Miss Tess at this moment? What exactly had she experienced on her way home from work? While looking for Miss Tess' whereabouts, the police also investigated her social connections. Miss Tess had a very simple social circle. She was easygoing and had never had any conflicts with anyone. A month before her disappearance, Miss Tess announced to her family and friends that she was about to get married. She and her boyfriend were looking forward to the wedding. On the day she went to work, she had even discussed the decoration of the new house with her colleagues. Miss Tess had been working in this hospital for 3 years. She had always been very hardworking. As a pediatric nurse, she needed to be more patient at work, but Miss Tess had never complained. She had a very harmonious relationship with her colleagues and she often helped her colleagues at work. When they heard that Miss Tess was missing, her colleagues were very surprised. How could she go missing for no reason? Based on Miss Tess' off-work time, The police retrieved the surveillance footage from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. on November 20, along the route from the hospital to Miss T's home, to investigate Miss T's movement trajectory during this period. The surveillance video showed that after getting off work, Miss Ten hailed a taxi at the hospital entrance. At 8:15 p.m., she got off at an intersection about 300 yards away from her home. It could be seen that Miss Ten was still using her phone at this time. Shortly after Miss Ten entered the small path, a man followed her. In the surveillance video of a repair shop on the path, it could be seen that at 8:15 p.m., Miss Ten passed in front of the repair shop. Subsequently, this man followed Miss Ten and walked past. When the police visited this repair shop, a repairman provided the police with an important piece of information.
A worker from the repair shop told us that when he went to the bathroom that night, he heard a man yell, "Freeze!" Then he heard a woman say, "I'm not moving, please don't hurt me."
This bathroom was separated from the path leading to the river by only one wall. It was only a dozen meters away from Miss T's house. The repairman who heard the conversation thought it was a couple arguing and didn't pay much attention. Based on the time point recalled by the repairman, the police judged that the woman speaking should be Miss Ten, and the person talking to her should be the man who followed her. So Miss Ten was likely to have been kidnapped by this man here.
Miss T's last known appearance was in the repair shop surveillance footage. Her whereabouts have become our biggest mystery.
Centering around the repair shop, the police carried out a larger-scale surveillance investigation in all directions. 2 kilometers north of Miss T's house was the fire station. In the surveillance video of the fire station, a person riding a motorcycle caught the police's attention. At around 9:20 p.m. on November 20, this person was riding a motorcycle along Highway 210 from south to north. Something fell off the motorcycle halfway. It could be seen from the video that what fell was clothes. Subsequently, this person picked up the fallen clothes and then continued to drive north out of the surveillance screen. The location of the fire station's surveillance was on the way to the place where the clothes with Miss T's blood were found. The distance between these two locations was 1 kilometer.
After we got the surveillance footage from the fire department, we started wondering if the man in this video was the same one who'd been following Miss T in the earlier videos. Could he be a suspect? If he was, then the men's clothing we'd found earlier must have been dumped by him.
After analysis and comparison, the clothes with Miss Tian's blood were very similar to the clothes worn by the man who followed Miss Tian. The police deduced that the men who appeared in the 2 surveillance videos were likely the same person. This was an adult man, about 5 feet 6 inches tall with a slightly plump build. The location where Miss Tian's home was located had many forked paths. People who were not familiar with the area could easily get lost. Moreover, Miss Tian's coat was found on an open space by the river. There were withered grass over 1 meter high by the river. There was only one path that could lead from Miss Tian's home to this place. At night, without streetlights, the suspect was able to bring Miss Tian to this open space, indicating that this person was very familiar with the surrounding environment. So, the suspect was likely to live nearby. Therefore, the police took the surveillance video to the area near Miss Tian's home and asked the surrounding residents to identify the suspect in the video. The police learned that just a few days before Miss Tian's disappearance, in this area, 2 women had been robbed. However, since the 2 women were not harmed at that time and nothing was robbed, these 2 women didn't call the police. According to one of the robbed women, at around 8 p.m. on November 16th, when she was coming back from outside, after she entered this area, a man suddenly ran up to her and was about to rob her. Fortunately, a car happened to drive by at that time. The man was so scared that he immediately ran away. Who was this person? Was he related to Miss Tian's disappearance? So, the police immediately retrieved the surveillance video of the scene where the woman was robbed on the evening of November 16th for review. At around 8:40 p.m. that night, a man had been wandering by the roadside. At 8:49 p.m., he entered a small path. At 8:53 p.m., he came out of the small path again and then ran in the direction of Power Road. Due to the poor video quality and the long distance of the camera, the police couldn't clearly see the characteristics of the suspect. However, later, after the robbed woman carefully identified through the video, it was finally determined that the person who ran away in the surveillance was the one who tried to rob her. The robbed woman told the police that this man was not very tall, wore glasses, and had a slightly plump build. The police comprehensively analyzed that both the case of Miss Tian's disappearance and the case of the women being robbed occurred between 8 p.m. and 9 p.m., and the victims were all women walking alone. The suspect was about 5 feet 6 inches tall, with a plump build, and had an obvious pigeon-toed gait. The police judged that there was a high possibility that the suspects in these two cases were the same person. This suspect had changed his clothes and discarded the clothes he wore during the crime. The police analyzed that this person was very cunning and likely had a criminal record. This further narrowed the scope of the investigation. The police focused on investigating the people with criminal records in this area.
During our interviews, someone told us there was a man surnamed Liu who looked a lot like the person in the videos. Also, the place where he lives is very close to Miss Tian's home.
Mr. Liu, 34 years old, had been forced into isolation for drug rehabilitation. He was released at the beginning of 2015. After getting this information, the police found Mr. Liu and asked him to assist in the investigation. However, through observation, the police found that the way Mr. Liu walked was quite different from that of the suspect in the video. Moreover, on the night Miss Tian disappeared, Mr. Liu had been at home and didn't go out. A neighbor could testify for him. So, Mr. Liu's suspicion was ruled out. At this time, several residents reported to the police that the man in the video looked very similar to the son of Mr. Yu, the owner of the car wash shop. And this car wash shop was less than a mile away from Power Road. When it came to Mr. Yu's son, the nearby residents talked a lot, because he had just been released from prison over 2 months ago.
Before Mr. Yu was released, there had never been a case like this in this area. But since he got out of prison, 3 similar cases have occurred here.
Mr. Yu was born in 1986. Although he was not very old, he had been sentenced to 18 years in prison for robbery and rape. Comparing these cases of women being robbed, the suspect's modus operandi was very similar to Mr. Yu's. This made the police highly suspect him. When Mr. Yu was released from prison, he had registered at the local police station. The police retrieved the surveillance video from the police station at that time. From this video, it could be seen that Mr. Yu had an obvious pigeon-toed gait. So, the police notified Mr. Yu to come to the police station for interrogation immediately. But the news they got was that Mr. Yu had left the city on November 22nd. When investigating Mr. Yu's home, the police found a silver-gray motorcycle. This vehicle immediately caught the police's attention.
This motorcycle is also silver gray, and it looks a lot like the one seen in the earlier surveillance footage from the fire department. So he's a strong suspect.
Did the man's clothes found on Highway 210 belong to Mr. Yu? The police asked Mr. Yu's family to identify them.
We had Mr. Yu's father identify the clothing, and he said it belonged to Mr. Yu's older brother. Since his brother is rarely home, the clothes are kept in Mr. Yu's room. So we have reason to suspect that Mr. Yu was wearing his brother's clothes when he went out to commit the crime, which makes him even more suspicious.
All kinds of signs indicated that Mr. Yu was a major suspect in the case. The police decided to arrest him to find out Miss Tian's whereabouts as soon as possible. But when the police arrived in Xi'an, they found that Mr. Yu was not in Xi'an. Did he notice something and run away? However, after a thorough police investigation, they found that Mr. Yu had fled to Beoji City. The police eventually caught him there and brought him into custody. Although Mr. Yu was arrested by the police, he remained silent during the interrogation. Although the police had a premonition that Miss Tian might have been killed at this time, they needed to find her either alive or dead. The police believed in their judgment and were sure they could find Miss Tian's whereabouts from Mr. Yu.
On the second day of interrogation, he made a request. He said he wanted to see his older brother, and if we agreed to that, he would confess to his crimes truthfully. So we agreed to his request.
Mr. Yu had a total of 6 siblings, and he was the 4th. After being released from prison in September 2015, Mr. Yu's elder brother asked him to help manage some of his business. His brother gave him a lot of help, hoping that he could start a new life as soon as possible.
When he met with his older brother, he told him something sort of like final words. We thought he was about to confess to the crime, but to our surprise, he only talked about an attempted robbery he'd committed.
大概是几点？7、8点。你当时咋想的？女的往回走的。我说跟过去以后，这女的肩膀拍了。
This time, Mr. Yu only admitted to the attempted robbery near Power Road in November 2015, but he still remained silent about Miss Tian's disappearance. The police showed him the surveillance video of the man following Miss Tian and the men's clothes found on Highway 210 for identification. Mr. Yu said that on the night of November 20th, he had been staying at home and didn't go anywhere. The person in the surveillance was not him, and he didn't know these clothes. Facing this situation, the police compared the male DNA extracted from Miss Tian's clothes with the DNA extracted from the men's clothes found on Highway 210. After testing, the results showed that they were from the same person. Faced with this irrefutable evidence, he finally confessed to his crimes.
我快到巷子口的时候，过来个出租车，就从车上下来，然后就往下走，然后我就跟着，那女的肩膀拍了，女的问我干啥，我说我抢钱，然后那个女的是先弄到那个河边那个空地。
According to Mr. Yu's confession, he dragged Miss Tian to an open space 200 yards east by the river. He tied Miss Tian up with clothes and a belt and blocked her mouth with his gloves. Then he ransacked all the belongings on her body. However, in the end, he only robbed a little over 10 yuans in cash and a mobile phone. But just after he completed the robbery, he suddenly found that Miss Tian had stopped breathing.
当时你认为这女的咋了？死了。你当时认为这女的死了，你觉得这女的死了？你把这女的骗了，骗哪去？骗河里。河里，你是把她咋骗到河里去？扛到河边，顺着河边滚下去。
Mr. Yu confessed that he threw Miss Tian and her backpack into the river together. But in a panic, he left Miss Tian's clothes on the riverbank. After that, Mr. Yu went home, changed his clothes, and then rode his motorcycle out. He threw Miss Tian's mobile phone and the clothes he wore during the crime in different places. Under Mr. Yu's guidance, the police found Miss Tian's mobile phone in the grass. On December 3, 2015, the 14th day after Miss Tian's disappearance, according to Mr. Yu's confession, the police searched the river for Miss Tian's body. The discovery of Miss Tian's body successfully solved this sensational missing person case. On the morning of November 3rd, 2017, the court made a final judgment in this case. Mr. Yu was sentenced to death for robbery, intentional homicide, and abandonment of a corpse. Today's story is over. If you have any thoughts on this case, please leave a message in the comments section to discuss. Thank you for watching this video. See you next time.